confidence doesn't necessarily come from getting everything right all the time. It actually comes from learning that you can bounce back when things go wrong. You are not just raising confident kids, you are shaping emotionally resilient. Welcome back to another coaching call. Super excited to have you guys with us today. We've got some fantastic questions, and I'm hoping I can bring lots of value to help you guys accelerate the confidence development of your kids. So let's get cracking. So first question here from Khan. My child gives up the second something feels hard. How do I help them push through instead of shutting down? That's a great question. So first up, it's important that when your child shows frustration, you don't immediately deny them of that emotion and tell them don't be silly or to ignore the emotion. So you've got to name the feeling first. Again, a big part of trying to develop their confidence is actually developing their emotional understanding, their emotional intelligence, right? And not repressing their emotions. So before trying to solve it, just name the emotion. That emotion is probably frustration, right? So if they give up, something feels hard, they're feeling frustrated. So name the emotion first, then you can tackle the rest of it. The next thing I've got down here is to break the challenge into micro steps. So we always say this throughout the Confidence Challenge. There are certain threads that weave through exactly how to mentor your child. And a big part of that is building momentum. How do you build momentum? You build momentum by taking small steps all the time. If you were going to run a marathon, you wouldn't suddenly try and run 40 kilometers on your first day. You would run 1 kilometer, see how you feel. Maybe the next day you'd run 2, or the next week you'd run 2, and you gradually build up. That does two things. First of all, it lets your body adapt, but more importantly, I would say, is it gives you the confidence and the motivation to want to do more. Your kids are going to look back, and when they decide whether or not they want to do something, or indeed what they say here, which is the second that something feels hard, they want to give up, they're going to look back and think, am I motivated to do this? Do I want to do this? What's the point? Now, if you've built up a series of small wins, what you're actually doing is building momentum, so they're more likely to want to go and do something. The beautiful thing about this is you are developing their intrinsic motivation. You are developing their inner drive, right? That is one of the key contributing factors to your child's confidence. So, break the challenge into micro steps, build momentum. The next thing I would say is ask what's one thing we could try differently to shift from stuck to curious. So you're now trying to ask them to solve the problem, rather than you coming in and saying, well, we're going to do this differently. Maybe you just ask them, especially if they're a senior or a preteen, definitely a teen. You want to get them on board. I would probably revert back to one of the videos I made where I talk about the style of parenting or mentor you need to be in this stage. What character are you right now, right? Because if you're speaking to a teenager, it's very different to speaking to a junior. You need to get them on board. This almost needs to feel like their own idea. So this is frustrating. We've named the emotion, right? That's frustration. We've then said, okay, let's break this down into small wins and make it really, really easy to begin with and build momentum. And then we're looking at it like, okay, what would you suggest we do to make this better, or to make it easier, or to make this less frustrating? And let them take ownership of that. Those three things alone will probably really help you. The next thing I think is sharing your own vulnerability, or you're modeling the experience they're going through, right? So sharing your own stories of struggle. Try to relate to something you've done. It's important you don't do this at the very beginning. You've got to appreciate they are their own human being going through their own problems, and you need to give them the space to actually experience that. If you fly in with this and say, oh, it's just like when I did this, they're going to start to resent you a little bit because you're going to make everything about you. So tread carefully with this, but I would suggest making the experience of finding something frustrating and then overcoming it a behavior that you model. And you can model that behavior through telling them stories about where you experienced something similar. You can even make it something which they've seen, right? Do you remember that time when I did this? Or that time where I was cooking dinner and I burnt all the food and it was a disaster and I found it really frustrating. I thought I was a terrible chef and then I overcame it and then I cooked a really great meal or something and everyone loved it, right? Maybe that's a silly example, but you get my drift, right? It's about trying to find something relatable. If you can add humor into it, probably even better. The next thing is celebrate the comeback, not the completion. So imagine you're approaching this and the goal is not about them achieving the habit or the exercise. The main goal here is about them seeing the value in the struggle and overcoming the frustration. And all of that comes down to your energy on how you compliment them or praise them based on their effort over the results. We don't want your child to become performative. We want them to become intrinsically motivated to try new things, to leave their comfort zone, to grow, to struggle, and to accept that struggling is part of normal life. Celebrate overcoming that struggle. That is going to make a massive impact. Hopefully, that helps answer that question. Moving on. O'Connor says, my daughter takes every correction so personally, she melts down over the smallest mistake. How can I help her handle feedback better? Again, very similar to the last question, but I wanted to really hammer this one home. Start with empathy. When you're approaching a child who's upset or emotional about something, always go in with empathy, not conflict. So going in with empathy, it's hard, I totally get that, really, really valuable. The next thing is to model feedback yourself. So you want to ask your child how they could improve or how you could improve. That's going to really help them understand the process of this, right? How could one improve with this? The next thing is use the and rule. So you made a mistake and you're still learning. They've already noticed they've made the mistake. Don't avoid the fact that this is a mistake. Mistakes are normal. We're not running away from failure. We're not teaching kids to be avoiding failure or to be afraid of failure. We're not giving out participation medals. We're teaching kids the value of struggling and falling down and failing and how they can learn from failing. So this one and rule says that failure is not final. It says, you've made a mistake and you're still learning, right? It changes the energy in the experience. So try and add that word on when you're speaking to them. A big part of this whole challenge is about language. You've probably noticed that already. What I'm doing with you over these 30 days is trying to influence the way you speak, the choice of your words. Ultimately, when you speak to your kids, you are painting a picture of what they'll become. So you're starting to notice similar threads in the whole way through this challenge. It's that consistency in the language and your approach and the context of everything that makes the difference here. The next thing is to have a journal. So keeping a record of times that your daughter, in this case, O'Connell, has tried again after failing, right, or after a mistake, or after something didn't go to plan. You'll notice that I'm really keen on keeping a log of evidence when a child's done something really well. And that goes throughout junior to senior to preteen to teen, right? If your child does something, they overcome something, write it down. Now, you can go one step deeper on this. If you notice that, they're taking correction so personally, we need to reframe that in their mind, right? So with the failure, add that into the win. So imagine you're writing down a win, okay, whatever it is. I stood up and I spoke in the assembly. Well, maybe that was linked to a previous failure. Like the week before, I froze and I couldn't speak. In their mind, that was a failure, right? I was meant to do this thing, I didn't do it, I failed. Well, now you're linking that failure to a win, and they're understanding the pattern between failure, overcoming failure, and the win, right? That is the pattern we want to create. It's not about the win itself. It's actually so important they have that failure, so they get the struggle, so you can complement the struggle, and they repeat the process to get the win. Literally, that process is the development of confidence in a human being, if I had to summarize it in one simple sentence. The next thing is to remind her that mistakes aren't the opposite of success, they're part of it. Okay, so just to end on that, mistakes aren't the opposite of success, they're actually part of it. It's about making them understand that this is completely normal, failure is completely normal and actually needed in order to succeed. I hope that one helps. Mrs. Patel, my son gets anxious before school performances. He says, what if I mess up? How can I calm his nerves? Okay. One of my favorite reframes for nerves is that it's actually excitement, right? So when human beings, adults too, experience nerves, it's this anxious energy, right? But it doesn't necessarily mean that we're nervous about something. It actually could well mean we're excited about something. And the physiological response of excitement is very similar to anxiety or nerves. It's about reframing in your mind. So anxiety is purely the concern that something's going to go wrong in the future. And excitement is that something might go right in the future. You're looking forward to the outcome of that thing, right? So it's just a reframe there. So when your child tells you they're nervous, obviously say to them, you completely understand those feelings and nerves, and those feelings and nerves feel a lot like excitement. Maybe actually you're just excited. Are you looking forward to this aspect of it or this aspect of it? Is there anything about the upcoming experience that you're actually excited about? Try and pull on that energy, right? The positive side of the anxious energy you want to try and pull out. The imagination that things are going to go right. You double down on that, the nerves leave, the excitement grows, they perform better. From a very practical point of view, you can practice breathing together. Breathing has a massive impact on that anxiety level, dropping it down. I do this with my kids, 3 long breaths, and I can see their physiological state literally shift. Do it with them, especially if they're young. Bring them close to you and let them feel your body filling with air and emptying. They will copy you, they'll model that. Don't just do it in the moment where they're nervous. Build this into their routine. If you do this when they are in the moment and they're nervous, then it's going to be difficult to kind of for them to repeat that all the time. And it might seem a bit odd you suddenly doing it. And they won't be as proficient in that exercise. But if you teach them how to do it when they are going through their normal day and something goes right or wrong, whatever it is, you find that they're excited or nervous or angry, and you teach this habit of breathing and composing themselves, what you're actually teaching is emotional regulation. And really, I think for our kids, what we don't want to do is to teach them, we don't want to remove pressure from their life, which I feel like we're doing so much in society nowadays, we're giving pressure this bad rep, when really, we need to give kids the tools to overcome high pressure environments, right? There's a way to do this, and a big part of that is teaching them composure through breathing and emotional regulation. Again, you can always share a story about a time that you felt nervous, how you overcame it. That sharing of a vulnerability really builds trust and helps them understand this is normal. And finally there, I would say celebrate courage, not comfort. Going back to day 1, where I spoke about courage being the most important trait you can give your children. Everything is downstream from courage. If you want to give your child confidence, focus on courage first. In those earlier videos, I talk about the 5 friction points that people often have, which slow down the exercising of the courage muscle. So many people focus on confidence, and they want to build confidence, and here are the exercises to build confidence, and the morning routines, and the language, which is all fantastic. But if you really want to develop your child's confidence, develop the skill and the muscle of training courage. And so really focus on the courage side. Skip to day 1, have a look at those videos again, you'll really benefit from that. Okay, Mr. Lee's question here. My kids fight constantly. How can I teach them to handle conflict without me always stepping in? Probably a very relatable question there for most parents. At every age that happens, right? Try to teach the pause before the react rule. So try to make sure that they both take a breath before speaking. So most of the time where arguments escalate, it's typically because emotions involved and they're reacting very, very quickly. That distance of time between feeling the emotion and having the reaction is too short. You can pause that or slow that down by teaching them to have a breath. Now, initially, you might need to be there to say, right, big breath, everyone, and force them to do the breath. I'll go in between my kids when they argue and I'll make them both do 3 big breaths. This 3 big breath rule is just amazing, by the way. It changes everything. But what you're doing is you're creating this gap, a bigger gap. And I use it for myself when I have big decisions to make, right? If I've got a massive decision to make with the business, with life, whatever it is, maybe a big stressful financial decision, I'll try and create a gap between the emotions, and that emotion could be excitement. I'm about to invest in something exciting, or make a big decision for the company, which I'm really looking forward to, or the emotion of anxiety or worry. It could be a scarcity mindset coming in. Either way, if I feel a strong emotion, I try to create a big gap. And that often means sleeping on it, right? I can just sleep on the decision and the next day make the decision with a calm mind. I'm not reacting from that emotion. It's the same thing with your kids from a very small level. It's teaching them to have a calm, balanced, centered mind before they react. Initially, you'll have to be there to teach them the 3 breaths, but over time, you'll step back and you'll watch them actually do that themselves. They'll slowly begin to have a breath themselves. They know that they're feeling in this hyper emotional state, and by the time they're preteens or teens, you'll find that they can actually, before they respond. 1 breath might change everything for them. It might save you some grey hairs and a bit of peace of mind when your kids stop arguing as much. So I hope that helps there. The other thing I would say is really double down on praising peacemaking. If you find that your kids argue and, a lot of parents, right, they have their 2 kids arguing. They tell the kids off and they stop arguing. They rarely give them the moment to try and solve it on their own, which is difficult, right, especially if things escalate. But imagine that you provide them with emotional regulation techniques like the breathing to create that gap. They're more likely to do it. And then when it is all over, they tend to tell them off for doing it in the first place, rather than instead focusing on praising them for peacekeeping. Imagine if you went in and you watched them resolve things, and you actually reinforce that behavior of resolving conflict, right? And you said, I'm really proud of you guys for the way that you handled that, and you calmed down afterwards. I saw the way you were breathing. That was amazing. The way you controlled your emotions, didn't react angrily. I noticed how you stepped back, and even though they stole your toys and you didn't suddenly respond, you tried to resolve the conflict, and in obviously the right words for their age group. You're building up, you're reinforcing that behavior of peacekeeping. That's massive if you can do that, right? Because I run a martial arts organization, and we teach 10,000 kids every week. So many parents come to us and they say, I want to teach my kids to fight back. If a bully hits them or whatever, or teases them, I want to teach them to fight back. And really, 99% of bullying can be prevented just by teaching kids de-escalation techniques like this. If I can make your child an expert in de-escalating conflict, using humor, or being an expert in peacekeeping, their life becomes calmer, less stressful. They become less intimidated because they know they can handle situations. One of the best self-defense techniques is teaching your child to de-escalate conflict. So actually, they learn this by arguing with their siblings. It's not wrong that your siblings are arguing. What is wrong might be how you're approaching it. Use all of those arguments as an opportunity to teach peacekeeping, to teach emotional regulation, to teach composure under pressure. You're teaching them self-defense without even realizing it. Then, of course, they need to learn how to defend themselves physically. Obviously, if someone's in their personal space and they are being attacked physically, that is vital as well. So, I hope that helps. One more thing to add on to that. It's an uncomfortable one because it's modeling behavior as well. They need to see adults having disagreements and modeling healthy resolution to that. So if you have an argument with your partner and suddenly you're angry, you both storm out, that's something you need to work on, because ultimately they're going to copy that, right? It's difficult because I'm coaching groups of parents here who are doing one of the hardest things that they can possibly do, which is trying to develop the character of their kids. And the harsh reality of this is it all comes down to us, right? Which is beautiful in a way, because if you want to be a great parent, all you've got to do is focus on being a great person. The hardest thing about that is, your child's going to model everything you're doing. So if certain things trigger you, it will end up triggering them as well. The toxic traits that we don't have the courage to face ourselves, we pass on to our kids. The demons we can't face, they have to face. I saw a quote the other day, which is along the lines of, if your daughter grew up in a house with an angry dad, she'll always have an angry dad in the house. You can look at that and say, well, I grew up in an angry house. My dad was angry, and I'm not. My husband or partner's not angry at all. And the response to that is, well, you are the angry dad in the house. A lot of people actually don't realize they're taking on that anger. They're the ones being snappy, and it then influences their kids, because their kids will then model that. So it's the harsh reality, but also the beautiful reality of parenting is that we have the opportunity to influence our kids by the way that we behave. And the great thing about that is we've got to focus on ourselves, the things that trigger us and how we can improve. Okay, next up. Mr. Evans asked, I feel guilty when I lose my patience. How do I recover without feeling like I've failed? Great question. First up, apologize quickly. I was really frustrated. That wasn't the right behavior. Can we try again? The power of apology in your kids. You are essentially teaching them how love is under pressure. In a healthy home, in a healthy relationship, when things go wrong, how do people respond? You are showing them that by apologizing. If you don't apologize, what you're actually teaching them is to repress their emotions, to focus on their ego, and not to make things up when they do go wrong. So, really important you do show that repair in real time. Hug them, laugh, try to reset as quickly as you can, right? I would also say, just to be completely real here, if you are you've had a really stressful day at work and you're coming home and you're angry and you're stressed and that's life, and you don't feel like you're in the right place to mentor your kids. If you've got the opportunity to have a partner who's there to help and support you with this, because a lot of, there'll be single parents in this group who don't necessarily have that, that privilege, right? But if you do have a partner who's on your team and they're there and they're available, let them know, I'm not in the right state to look after the kids right now. I'm angry, and I've had a really bad day at work. I need 20 minutes. Don't use those 20 minutes just to go on your phone. Try and use those 20 minutes to actually calm yourself down. Do some meditation, do some gratitude journaling, this sort of stuff. So you actually get in a headspace so that you can then be around your kids. It's far better that you're around your kids for 5 minutes and it's positive and it's quality than half an hour where you're on your phone, easily agitated, and you're snappy. All right? Ideally, it's quality and quantity, but in that moment where you're not in the right mental state, it's certainly quality over quantity. And again, that kind of guilt that you might feel, totally normal, and try to turn that into guidance instead. Look at this like every time you mess up, you're snappy, whatever it is, every single time, rather than you having to swallow your pride or ego, it's an opportunity to repair. And every time you repair, you deepen trust. You actually improve your relationship, right? So every apology where you have this opportunity to swallow your ego, you actually just improve the relationship. And then of course, reflect afterwards. You snapped. Why did you snap? What was it that caused it? What friction points in your life can you remove so it happens less? It's not necessarily going to never happen. What can you do to prevent it from happening as much? Okay, Mr. Santos, my child refuses to try new foods, games, or experiences. How can I help them be more open-minded? Try to make trying new things playful and exciting and lower the stakes a little bit, right? Take the pressure off it and make it fun. Turn it into a game, first of all. Try to model curiosity. They've got to see you trying something you've never done before. And that could be, a new exercise, a new sport, a new bit of food, a new drink, whatever it is. Creating a new meal from scratch with a new recipe. Trying things for the first time. If they don't see you doing it, they're less likely to do it themselves. So you've got to try and foster this curiosity in trying new things. If they are refusing new things, try to add humor into it. Humor really helps. I feel like laughter lowers fear, right? And opens willingness. So you want to use laughter to lower fear and open willingness. That's going to really help. Also celebrate the trying. Always celebrate the trying. And repeat the message. That we don't have to love everything. I've written down here, we don't have to love everything, but we do have to give it a go, right? It's great to give things a go. Don't force them to give it a go, but just make that the energy. We love trying new things. In the same way that when I try to teach families to have this culture of courage, I have the mantra, we try hard things. You can have something similar for fostering curiosity. We try new things, right? So that's how I would approach that. Mr. Santos, I hope that helps. Let's pull today's questions together, because every question I feel today really pointed to one big theme, and that is that resilience isn't about toughness, it's about recovery. Confidence doesn't necessarily come from getting everything right all the time, it actually comes from learning that you can bounce back when things go wrong. When your child fails, feels nervous, fights, or shuts down, that's not a problem to fix, it's a moment to model calm. The way that you handle frustration, feedback, and fear teaches your child that feelings aren't dangerous, right? Every feeling has its purpose. And that's just part of growing up. Your kids need to see that. When we train our kids, we're training them for adulthood. A big part of that is understanding their own emotions. We spoke about creating a gap between feeling and reacting, which is really important. We talked about validating before correcting, validating their feelings. We talked about repairing relationships and using those as opportunities to deepen trust, especially after losing your patients or feeling snappy. You're basically showing them what emotional safety looks like. And emotional safety is the foundation of confidence. We also talked about perfectionism, the what if I mess up spiral that so many kids and also parents experience. The antidote, of course, isn't more reassurance, it's actually more realness. So, we talked a bit about when you laugh at your mistakes, when you show them that you can try something new and survive. We talked about how courage is contagious and how you need to foster that in your family. Go back to those original videos on day one where I talk about the 5 friction points of courage. See if you've managed to embed them. There might be some things in that, right? The overprotective energy, the language, and so on, which you can actually work with. Sibling conflicts and meltdowns. These are mini training grounds for life. I reflected on the fact that teaching your child to de-escalate conflict is one of the greatest skills for self-defense you can teach them, and for life. We realize that your kids are learning how to handle emotions. You're fostering that in the way you model, but also in what you teach every day. Your kids are learning how to negotiate. They're learning how to repair relationships. These are real skills, and they last long after the homework and the trophies fade. These skills you're developing, they last long after the 30-day challenge. As we are heading into the next week of the challenge, remember this: you are not just raising confident kids, you are shaping emotionally resilient humans who know how to try new things, how to fail, how to repair, and ultimately how to rise again. This week, focus on being calm, focus on being honest, and focus on your recovery as a parent from those little moments where you think you've snapped, where you think your mood wasn't right, where you pushed too hard, whatever it is. Double down on the recovery and praise yourself for how quickly you recover on that. You don't need to be perfect, right? But you do need to keep showing up. What your kids need sometimes is that messy, real experience, having a parent, but keeping it steady, right? You are the steady rock in their life because they're learning so much, but they don't need a perfect parent, they need a real parent. So, for me, that is the foundation of developing lifelong confidence. I hope that you enjoyed today's Q&A session. As always, make sure you click the link below to submit your questions, and I look forward to seeing you next week.